All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. This is my very first and very special guest for this new blog series I'm doing called the Purpose Driven Entrepreneur Series. And I'm excited to have Anastasia Allison here with me today. Thank you so much for coming and doing this. You're my first.
Hey, I feel so honored that I am. Thanks for
Yes.
having me.
Yes. Well, tell us a little bit about what you do, who you are, where you live. Just give me the lowdown.
Yeah, so my name's Anastasia Allison, and I live north of Seattle. So I live in the Pacific Northwest, and I am what I like to consider an adventurepreneur, which is really a title that I made up for myself because what I wanted to be didn't really exist. And so I realized throughout the course of my life that I had to create that. And that's essentially what I've done. And now I spend my days doing a variety of different things, but primarily I am the violinist for a group called the Musical Mountaineers, and we actually carry a piano, or rather a keyboard, and I play the violin. We carry those into the mountains for unannounced wilderness concerts at sunrise. I also founded and started a company called Kula Cloth, which makes a very specific product for outdoor and adventurous women. And I also do some coaching for aspiring adventurepreneurs. And really, I feel like my life is just full of all of these things that I love, and it's just really rich and exciting, and I feel like I'm always eager and sort of like anticipating what's coming next. And I love the sense of expansion that I feel on a regular basis. Like, there's no limit to what this can become for me. It's just whatever feels really good and exciting.
That's amazing. And I think the thing that always gets me about you is you just have an idea and you make it happen.
Yeah.
And well, at least you're working on a lot of different ideas. And I think from what I know of your story, that wasn't always the case. And you mentioned that you kind of wanted to, or you didn't see what was out there in the way that you wanted to have a career. So you said you had to create it yourself. So can you tell me a little bit about that journey you took? You know, what were the key moments that kind of helped you see what you could create? And then when did you finally pull all those threads together to do what you're doing now?
Yeah, and I think, I hope a lot of people can relate to this, where they have possibly experienced this sense of like a calling or wanting to do something more, and sort of looking around at where they are in life and wondering how they got there. And I think I'm very, very similar to a lot of people in that was what I felt. I felt like I was sort of living my life on autopilot, just sort of being bounced around like a pinball, going from one thing to the next without really intentionally sort of deciding or believing that I could create what I wanted to in my life. And I was raised very traditionally, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And as I sort of ultimately discovered, all the things that I experienced in my life have made what I'm doing now possible. But I was raised very traditionally, and I believed a lot of extremely limiting things about what was possible for me. I looked at these people who were doing these really awesome, adventurous things, and I thought that those people were very lucky, or that they somehow had special skills that I did not possess. And that I remember thinking that there was sort of these two groups of people: the really lucky people who got to have a fun, exciting, adventurous life, and then there were just the people like me who were just sort of stuck where I was. And the beliefs that really got in my way were things that people had told me. And these were very well-meaning people. It wasn't like anybody was trying to sabotage me, but they really projected a lot of fears onto me. And I took those to heart. So things like, all businesses always fail, or you're being silly and reckless, and people don't get to make a living doing what they love. Well, if you believe that people don't get to make a living doing what they love, then guess what? you probably won't get to make a living doing what you love. And so it was really the process of identifying those beliefs that were sort of standing in my way, recognizing that they were simply incorrect thoughts. And once I learned how to move past those, things started to fall into place because I got momentum going in a direction that I really wanted it to. For me, a little bit of a backstory, and you know some of this, but I was a park ranger, which I loved. I loved my job as a park ranger. I got laid off from that job. And instead of asking myself, hey, Anastasia, what do you really want to do with your life? I remember sort of panicking and thinking, well, geez, I'm in law enforcement. I guess I have to go into law enforcement. And so I just took a job as a police officer without really thinking about it. And I loved that job. It was fun at the time. But I sort of got to this point again where I sort of felt that sense of longing, like this isn't what I was meant to do for a living. But again, also very paralyzed by the fears that were holding me back. And I had a very nearly fatal car accident that for me was a huge turning point in my life. And it really shook that illusion of stability that I had been living under. And I thought that if my whole life can just be gone in a fraction of a second, then what am I afraid of? And I didn't just get into a near fatal car accident and then just go the next day and quit my job. What it really started with was finding gratitude and appreciation and satisfaction where I was at that moment. So finding that satisfaction as a police officer even. And what happened is when I started focusing on the things that were going really well in my life, all of these other things started to fall into place, and that pathway sort of presented itself to me. And so ever since then, I've really just been following that path, and it's been really fun and rewarding. And I did end up leaving my job as a police officer. But I think that path exists for all of us. And that's one thing that this journey has taught me, is that I think each of us has something really special within us that we are meant to bring into the world. And it is the most incredibly fun process to discover what that is.
I love that. And I think you mentioned the pathway and that unique specialness that each of us has. And It seems like many of us don't see that quite easily, or not right away during our careers or during our life. So it really starts with that longing, that little hint of something that may not feel right and may not feel like it's perfectly aligned with who we want to be. And do we listen to it, or do we keep ignoring it? And I think that's really the question, is do I go after this idea, this vision of who I want to be and what I want my life to look at, or do I just kind of go on this path of least resistance because it seems more traditional? And I think the thing that's so shocking about you and even like people I know in my own journey is that there has to be like a wake-up call in a sense.
Yeah.
And it can be on a different scale for everyone. For you, it was a big deal. For me, I ended up in the hospital and I was like, oh shit, like I need to like figure this out. But for some people, it doesn't need to be that big.
No, I mean, I think a wake up call could be as simple as somebody listening to our conversation today and saying, oh my gosh, this was meant for me and I needed to hear this. And I think that where people very often get stuck is that they try to know the how from where they are right now. And that's really where I got stuck for many years, is I would think to myself, okay, I want to be this adventurous woman. I want to do these amazing things. And I would try to sit down and just know all the answers of how to get there. And you don't need to know all the answers. I really think that that's the trick that I've sort of mastered, is that I don't need to know the answers of how I still remember I posted my vision statement, I think maybe 2 years ago, and it was something like, I want to start an outdoor company for women. And I had no clue how I was going to do that. I did not even know how to sew. Yeah. And of course, like, my product needed to be sewed. And so, but what's really neat is when you believe that everything is possible and you just start taking the little steps that you know how to take, the answers, they will come and find you. And you'll look back at some point and think, oh my gosh, that's how I was going to do that.
Right. Oh, sorry. I was going to say,
go ahead.
It reminds me of this quote I always have loved. Steve Jobs said
yes.
it. Yeah, okay, you know what I'm talking
about.
At a commencement speech, he said, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. And I think that's just such a poignant thing for anyone who, especially entrepreneurs, to know is you don't need to know necessarily how you're going to get there, but you can reflect on where you are now and what has brought you to this moment, and know that there are dots that are going to keep moving you forward, especially if you have a vision in mind for the end dot that you want to end up at.
Exactly. And so it's interesting because how I sort of approach what I'm doing now is I have this much broader vision. I have things that I want to accomplish along the way, and I have no clue how I'm going to do any of them. I write them down and I think, okay, I don't know how to do that, but I feel like that will likely happen at some point on my journey. And then so it's like this subtle balance of having a vision for where you want to go while finding very deep gratitude and appreciation for where you are right now. Because I think the other thing that is sometimes possible when you launch into entrepreneurship is that you spend a lot of time focused on where you aren't. Like, oh, I haven't reached this level yet, or you compare yourself to other people who are much further along. And when you do that, you're focusing on essentially what you don't have. And so I think one of the things that I'm really good at, which has accelerated my path very quickly, is that I really just try to savor where I am. And so even if I haven't reached the pinnacle of where I think I want to go, which of course will always be growing and expanding anyway, so you'll never reach it. Yeah. It's like, with my outdoor company, Kula Cloth, I've been handwriting notes on the envelopes as I ship them out. And I've just been really trying to soak in what that means, that people have purchased my product. And when you can live in that state of appreciation and gratitude, it's impossible to simultaneously feel fear or doubt. And I think that is such a skill and a muscle that needs to be practiced, because as an entrepreneur, it is very easy to get back into your head and tell yourself that you're being ridiculous and that you're going to fail.
Well, I think that's especially true especially if you're taking a risk.
Yes.
And one of the things I remember, I guess I didn't mention that for anyone watching or listening, Anastasia and I worked together, I don't even know, 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago.
On her first website for herself. It's AnastasiaAllison.com. And I remember during that process, you were really trying to kind of figure out what your mission was and your purpose was. And you didn't really know, but you were just putting it out there. And you said, I'm just going to shape this into something that's meaningful for me. And then to see where you are now, I mean, it's
crazy.
It's a whole different ballgame. But at that time, I remember you were really thinking about your departure from your park ranger job. What were you doing?
Yeah, I was a police officer then.
Yeah, but you were really really about that risk, because you knew financially you needed to be stable enough so that you could take that entrepreneurial risk. And I think I loved how you thought through that process in terms of okay, I need my website live by this date because I'm going to be quitting my job by this date, and I'm funding all of this like in the next 6 months.
Yep.
I think like that is really admirable, and something that I think more entrepreneurs should know is that if you're going to be taking any type of creative entrepreneurial risks, you need to create a strategic plan so that you're not freaking out like as you're taking that risk, because that's where the fear comes in. That's where you get paralyzed, and that's where you can't grow because you're so scared of not being able to grow.
Yeah. And I think not only that, but like your brain tries to know the answer to every possible contingency plan that will ever happen. And it's very easy to, when I sort of try to think about like, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to afford this like 6 months down the road, a year, you know, and you just try to like think too far out, it can almost, to me, it feels like it causes this like retraction where I'm just like, I get so fearful. And so I think one thing that really helped me was not only did I have a strategic plan that felt manageable, but when I felt myself going too far down, like too far into the future and getting fearful of things like 5 years down the road, you know, if you find yourself envisioning yourself living in a box on the side of the railroad tracks, like five years down the road, and you're just, you know, you've sort of prophesized this horrible future for yourself, you're going to fail, and you know, you're sort of going down that dark path. That's when I tend to, first off, recognize that I'm going into a very unhealthy thought pattern, and then trying to do something almost completely unrelated to that so that I don't give those fears or those beliefs more momentum than they deserve. And so that's honestly where playing my violin or going hiking or something along those lines comes into play a little bit, which seems unrelated, but I think when it comes down to getting yourself unstuck, it's really easy to just paralyze yourself with fear. And so you need a way to pull yourself out of it.
Yeah, and that kind of brings to mind, I'm currently working with someone to help me build my community online.
Yeah.
And she has a really great process she's putting me through of asking me kind of what is the transformation I want to facilitate for my community, and also what are the values that really drive the community. And one of the values that came up for me that's been so important to me personally is mindfulness. And I think I hear threaded throughout everything you're saying is that that's been such a key component of your work, both internally, but also in building a business. You know, you mentioned whenever you have this kind of like vision of yourself sleeping by a railroad, which you're the only person who would actually survive that.
I know. Yeah, I was a railroad police officer, just to sort of give some context.
Yeah, but like you said, okay, well, like I noticed the thought pattern, I acknowledge it, and then I put it to the side. You don't ignore it. You just say, hey, I see you there. You're not really benefiting me. What can I do to counteract this? So do you feel like mindfulness is a huge part of your business as well as your personal life?
Oh my gosh. If I had to pick one thing that has helped me more than anything, it would be having a mindfulness, meditation, visualization, whatever you want to call it, having a consistent daily practice. And what's really interesting, and we mentioned the Steve Jobs quotes about you can only connect the dots backwards. When I was a police officer, I got very interested in PTSD treatment. And one of the things that I came across was mindfulness-based stress reduction through my experiences coping firsthand with PTSD. And so had I not had that experience as a police officer, I don't know if I would have come across this idea of meditation or mindfulness or visualization, which really is I would say, the foundation of my day. And what I typically do, I will do a visualization meditation every single day. I mean, I will not miss a day. And what it helps me to do is that, again, like you said, I can recognize when a thought that isn't particularly helpful comes into my mind, instead of following that thought to wherever it's going to take me, I can notice that it's there. Then I consciously and intentionally do something to sort of redirect my momentum. So that might be something like meditating again. It might be going for a walk. It might be playing my violin. It might just be doing something really fun. One of the things I love to do is write letters of appreciation to people, just people who've been a part of my life. And what happens is that doing those simple things pulls you out of that mode of thinking, and then you're sort of back on your path again, and you're making decisions and from a place of gratitude and love rather than from a place of fear and doubt.
Yeah, and I see this is a huge issue. I wouldn't call it a problem, but it's an obstacle that I come across a lot with entrepreneurs I talk with, especially newer entrepreneurs, especially if they're solopreneurs as well, because we are literally on our own most of the day. Like some days I can go till 6 p.m. when my husband comes home and I haven't spoken a word to anyone. So being in your head for that long on your own every single day, you almost need to survive with some type of mindfulness practice. And it doesn't mean you have to sit in meditation. You could go on a hike, you could go on a walk. As long as you just start to observe where your habits are coming from and what triggers those behaviors. Otherwise you can get in your own way so much. And I so many entrepreneurs that just, they either give up too soon, they burn out, or they get in their own way and they just don't even end up having a business after a year. And a lot of that is because of a mindset shift.
Yeah, I think everything is mindset. And I look back at my past, and I was a very entrepreneurial kid. I always had businesses growing up. I always had business ideas. I mean, I started a juice business when I was a kid, and it's sort of funny because I think of where that would be now had I actually continued on with it. But I killed all of those ideas because of those thoughts. And a thought isn't a thing. It's just a thought. And so it's really the practice of recognizing it and learning how to move past it over and over and over again. And the great thing is that it gets easier. Now the thoughts that would have completely derailed me, to use another railroad term, completely derailed me a couple of years ago, to me today, I think about it and okay, there it is. I'm going to continue on. And I think you get to this point as an entrepreneur where you sort of reach this point of no return, where your mission becomes bigger than who you are. And there's just no stopping you at that point. And that is just such a fun place to be, because you've picked up so much momentum and so much excitement, and you are starting to see what you're creating unfold in front of you. And it feels like magic sometimes.
Yes.
The most exciting thing ever. And so I think if you can trust the process to know that those magical moments are going to start to happen, once you start seeing them, it gets easier and easier to stick with it.
Yeah, so magic was the other value with my community. And I hesitated at first to put that because, well, it's magic, and I didn't want it to come off as, oh, you just wave a wand and things happen, because there's so much internal work. There's so much external work that has to be done to create magical moments. But like you said, as you build momentum, as you take action, as you get really clear on what your vision and your purpose is, those magical moments happen much more often.
Yes.
And I don't think it's new agey. I don't think it's like super woo woo. I think it's honest to God. That's just how life works.
Yes. But there is something so beautiful about the feeling of it, because it feels like magic. I had a moment a few weeks ago where I was sort of recognizing that I was in a place of fear. I was placing a very large order for some essentially wholesale fabric for my product. And there are still moments where I feel that old fear come into play, and placing an order for thousands of dollars for fabric can sometimes be a moment that brings up those old fears. And I really just took a moment. I put myself into a place of really just sensing gratitude and appreciation. I placed the order, and it was within an hour of that happening, I got a letter from somebody who wanted to write a story about me for a really large outdoor magazine. And it felt like magic, because I had let go, I had trusted, and boom, within an hour, this email comes in, and it just felt so good.
Yeah. And at the same time, that all the work that you did, all the brand building, all the videos you posted, all the blog content, like all the work that you've done over the years suddenly comes together in a moment where everything just clicks.
Yes.
I think like that's the thing that's often missed when we talk about this kind of synchronicity and magic and this kind of new agey way, is that there has to be so much work and so much focus and so much action put forth to a certain goal in order to make that kind of sparkly, empowering magic happen.
Yes, and it feels like magic, but there's no part of it that I believe is luck. Right. I believe that I did the work and created that moment, and I think that's exciting too, to know that I've been intentionally creating what I had envisioned, and there's just nothing cooler than that feeling.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about Kula Cloth, because when we first started working together, you were really focused on just crystallizing your message around inspiring people through their experiences in the wilderness.
Yes.
And that kind of, I see it completely related. Kula Cloth is totally related to that. But can you tell us a little bit about where that idea comes from and then how it connects to the other ones?
Yeah. So Kula Cloth is a product that I invented. It's a very specific product for women. And essentially what it is it's the very first of its kind that's ever been invented. And it is an antimicrobial pea cloth for adventurous women and girls. And I came across the idea of using a pea cloth as a backpacking instructor. I've been a backpacking instructor for a nonprofit here in Washington for about 10 years, and I've taught my own backpacking classes as well. And I was sort of frustrated with the amount of toilet paper that I was seeing in the wilderness, and I thought, this is disgusting. I read about the idea of using a pea cloth, and I thought, oh, that's sort of weird, but I'll give it a try because I'm a backpacking instructor, so I need to at least sort of vet it. And I loved it. It was totally life-changing because I wasn't having to pack in and out a bunch of toilet paper. And I was on a backpacking trip in 2015 and I was using this ugly blue scrap of microfiber as a pea cloth, and I was taking pictures of it to be funny, and I would send these pictures to a girlfriend who is a backpacker as well. And I was taking this picture in this beautiful location on the Continental Divide, and I remember looking at the picture and thinking, oh my gosh, I wish that looked cooler. I wish that looked like a legit piece of gear for women. Why am I using basically something that looks like it came out of a bin at Jiffy Lube as a pea cloth when I could be using like a real piece of gear? And so I had this idea. Now it was like this moment of a spark, and I went home, I did a little bit of research on it, and quite frankly, I got completely scared because I saw dollar signs, I didn't know how to sew, all this stuff, right? All the things that we've been sort of talking about on the call. They completely shut the idea down. So now fast forward a couple years, I've had my almost fatal car accident. I'm now working with you, and I'm sort of trying to discover my purpose and my path in life. And the idea just resurfaces to me one day. And this time I feel much less shackled by limiting beliefs and by a lack of sewing ability. And so I realized, hey, I might not know how to sew, but I know how to make a phone call. And I could call somebody who sews, right? Like the things that we think about when we're actually sort of open to the possibilities. And so I just started taking little steps. And I think when we worked together, what really came through to me is that I wanted to use the lens of the wilderness to sort of inspire other people to pursue their own path. And I think that what I realized is that in order for me to do that, I have to do it simultaneously while also pursuing my own path. And so Kula Cloth, it became a real product that people now buy, and it's been shipped all over the world now, and it's just totally fantastic. But it almost is, I feel like Kula Cloth is this physical manifestation of hopefully a way that I can still do what I wanted to do from the beginning, which is inspire other people to do something. And I hope that the story of a police officer who doesn't know how to sew creates a gear company, and she has no clue how to do it, and she does it, that could encourage other people to ask themselves what little step could they take to start pursuing that idea that they have thought was completely ridiculous. Because there were definitely times when I thought this was ridiculous. There were times when I cried about it. I mean, I've lost sleep over this pea cloth, and ultimately it has become incredibly successful. I mean, I've shipped it all over the world. It's like just mind-blowingly exciting to me. But the really exciting thing for me is that I don't think I'm unique in my ability to bring a product to life. I think that anybody, if I can do this, I guarantee that anybody can do this. And so I think Kula Cloth relates back to that inspiration really seamlessly.
So do you feel, and I'm asking this because I've really thought a lot about the idea of purpose-driven entrepreneurship lately. And I've done some Google searches. There are definitely some definitions out there. A lot of it's more about like nonprofits or, you know, serving specific communities in that sense, which I think is purpose-driven in itself. But I think there's a difference. And I will actually say, on a personal note, you were the first client when I was working with you. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the type of person I need to work with. She's so clear on who she wants to serve, how she wants to serve them. She may not know exactly what that looks like yet, but I'm able to help bring her vision to life for herself.
Yes.
And I think like you were the first one where I would come home every day and like tell my husband, I was like, Anastasia is so exciting. Like she's telling me all these things she's doing. And I just kept realizing like, this is what a purpose-driven entrepreneur is. Not at the time, like I didn't know that phrase yet, but like to you, do you feel like you're a purpose-driven entrepreneur? Do you feel like this one core mission that you have drives everything that you do? And do you want to continue bringing that purpose to life in whatever form that may be?
Absolutely. And I still remember when I wrote my very first mission statement, and it said something to the effect of that I want to inspire millions of people using my love of adventure and my love of the wilderness. And that is something that I feel like it's just this common thread in everything that I do. I don't ever want anything that I do to be the Anastasia show. Right. I want people to read my story and see themselves in my shoes and not look at me and think, oh, she's lucky or she has special talents that I don't have. I want them to look at me and think, oh my gosh, if Anastasia did this, then I can too. And so I think that inspiring other people to discover their path is a common theme, and it will continue to drive me in everything that I do. And I feel like it's sort of like this mission that I have that I don't think I could detach myself from it. Right. And it has made what I'm doing it doesn't feel like work to me. It really feels like a sense of purpose. I mean, even putting Kula Cloths in an envelope, it feels like I'm delivering this gift, right, to somebody, or this thing that means to me so much more than just a cloth. And I think that is really, really exciting. And I remember working with you when I first saw my website for the first time. It was this sense of excitement because I felt like for the first time somebody understood what I was trying to do, and all of a sudden I could see it. And I remember the very first time you sent me a draft of my website, and I looked at it and I just started crying because because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a real thing now, right? Like it was like I was taking the thoughts and making them they were becoming this real thing that people could see. And that's really rewarding and really beautiful. I don't think that I could do what I'm doing if it wasn't completely driven by a greater purpose to serve people, because I could go pick any outdoor product to sell and it wouldn't mean the same to me. And I think that Kula Cloth, the word Kula means community. And so there's so much more to this cloth than just a cloth that absorbs pee, because that in and of itself just sounds silly. But when you realize that this little piece of gear is creating connections on the trail, it's inspiring women, it's empowering them to get out, it's inspiring women to pursue their own path. I mean, I have artists now who are able to, I'm commissioning them to do work for, so the ripple effect of this is just really, really cool and exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on really quickly before we end, because I just think it's so joyful, the other aspects of your life. There's so many, but again, it's all connected by this common thread, the Musical Mountaineers.
Yeah.
I think what just always delights me when I see your videos pop up on my feed is that you just go for the fun of it and for having a creative outlet. And I had mentioned to you, one of my favorite books is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. And her whole thing is that creativity doesn't have to be this big, depressing trauma. You don't have to be like a mad genius, a tortured genius to be creative. Yeah. You can just be creative for creativity's sake and let go of the end expectation of any result. And I feel like that is so embodied in you hiking in the dark with a piano and a violin, and then putting on a dress before the sun rises, and then playing a beautiful sunrise concerto.
Yeah, and we play concerts for nobody. And I think, we don't announce where we're going. We for leave no trace reasons, and also because we don't want it to become a show, because I think that loses the specialness of what we're doing. And I think you're absolutely right. We very often will have these ideas and we don't pursue them because we tell ourselves that they're silly or that we shouldn't be wasting our time doing this. But the idea for the Musical Mountaineers, I sort of had a vision, I guess I'd call it, or just a flash of inspiration pop into my head one night while lying in bed that just said, go play your violin on the summit of a mountain. And I didn't really know how to interpret that at the time. Months later, it ended up through a very serendipitous series of events, it sort of culminated in me meeting my friend Rose, who plays the piano. And then on a whim, we just decided to go do this just for the sake of realizing a dream. Never, like you said, we had no expectations that anything would ever happen with this. And we threw in the gowns at the last minute. It was just for fun. And 2 weeks later, we were on the news. So, I mean, it was just sort of this whirlwind thing. And it really just goes to show you that when you follow your heart and when you lead with that and do the things that give you that feeling of being alive or that feeling of purpose or really shining light onto the good in the world, and you're doing these things just so organically and in such a pure way, it leads to things that you couldn't possibly imagine. And I think just trusting that you can follow those little flashes of inspiration without needing to know where they're going to go. And that's so much fun, because that sort of goes back to that feeling of magic where it doesn't need to lead anywhere, but maybe it will. And wondering where that might be. And we played, the Musical Mountaineers started on September 1st, 2017 with this random unannounced concert in the wilderness. And now, more than a year later, we've performed on stage at Benaroya Hall for the Washington National Parks Fund. We have performed at REI. We've been on the news many times. And so something that started just so small has grown into something really beautiful and special. And it brings a lot of light into the world for a lot of people. And I think for me, the Musical Mountaineers, we were talking at the beginning of our conversation about sort of reconnecting with ourselves and that mindfulness. And I feel I've sort of joked that the Musical Mountaineers is my fuel for everything else that I do in life. And there is a way that you feel after you go out into the backcountry, and combining that with music, I feel like it's sort of a double whammy. I come back and I'm just so refreshed and rejuvenated, and my spirit is just so happy and full of all the possibilities. And I think the more that each of us can stay in that type of a place, the better off we will be as entrepreneurs. And so it's just been one of the most beautiful parts of my life.
That's amazing. And I know you've given so many gems during this, however many minutes we've been talking, but I just wanted to end with a question. And since I'm guessing hopefully we'll have some entrepreneurs listening or watching this who may feel stuck, may have a vision for themselves, but they're not quite there yet. So would you be able to give them any specific insight or one piece of advice for where they are now and how that can help them move forward?
Yeah, I would say, first off, don't let not knowing trick you into thinking that there is no path for you. And I think that all of us are always on the path that we are meant to be on at every point, which means that if you feel stuck right now, for some reason, all the stuff in your past, it'll make sense. So you just have to trust that and feel gratitude for where you are right now. And one of the things that I really started with when I first decided that I was going to intentionally create my own life was just starting by visualizing what my perfect day might look like and just asking myself those questions, because we get so lost in trying to figure out exactly what this is going to look like. And then we realize that we've never even asked ourselves what we want that to be. And so I think, number one, don't get caught up in the how that this is going to happen. And number two, just start by simply asking yourself what you want your day to look like. And then I think really starting to believe and know that that's possible. And it is truly by following the good feeling thoughts that are going to start to come your way, that path for you to get from where you are now to where you ultimately want to go, it will start to illuminate for you. And the cool thing is that when it does start to illuminate for you, it's really obvious for you to find that path, because it'll feel the most fun and the most joyful, and you'll know when you're on it. And I just hope that my story can be an example to others that everything really is possible for all of us. All you really have to do is believe that it is.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. I mean, me 7 years ago would have loved to hear that. So,
Me too.
so hopefully this reaches someone in that same position. And I want to thank you obviously for being the first of this series, but more so for even moving me on this path of purpose-driven entrepreneurship, because I think you weren't the first. Actually, I think the person who referred you to me, Kate, was probably the first, but you were like the clear, oh my gosh, there's something to this. And I feel like we speak the same language with these things. And I finally started to recognize that this could be a thing. This could be purpose-driven entrepreneurship. And there are so many more people I've met in the past 2 years that really embody this. And that's why I created this series, was just to figure it out. You know, how do we become these purpose-driven entrepreneurs? How do we find our purpose and then create it out in the world? And what are trials and tribulations along the way? So
well, and I love it because I think that each of us does have a unique purpose, and it's easy to look at the world and say, oh, but it's so saturated, or there's so much competition. And I usually tell people, okay, the world is not saturated with you. There's only one of you. And when you believe that you have a unique purpose, it really is just the process of bringing that to life. And I think of a world where everybody is sort of living into what that purpose is. And my goodness, what a beautiful place that will be.
I agree. Let's make it happen.
Woohoo!
Well, thank you so much. And I can't wait to keep the conversation going on this, because I think there were so many gems in here, and I can't wait to rewatch this and listen to it again.
Me too. Thanks, Quinn.
Thank you.